Following from the last film, talking about ki, most people are just happy to do Aikido. Perhaps most things in life, you know, that either we have interests or we're not interested. Why did we choose the particular teacher? You'll all have different reasons why. But the masters I was talking about earlier, if O-sensei said that Kochi Toei was his greatest ever student, in his opinion, why would somebody pick, you know, Chiba Sensei? Is it because he was in this country? Possibly. I had the advantage of travelling around the world following Saito Sensei. And because he knew so many, and because of his high rank, and being at O-sensei's side for an unbroken 23, 24 years, I don't know exactly the amount. And he wasn't really very well known because he just worked on the railway until he was 50 and then retired. And then the world started to get to know him more. Before that, he didn't really go out much. And all the other masters, they'd been in the world a long time before that. So people who, like myself, who could travel, you could search out the master that impressed you or you liked. We didn't have many films though. We didn't have internet. We couldn't really. You had to ask. Anyhow, when I was travelling to see Saito Sensei, I travelled to every continent in the world eventually to see him. And I used to do this, I've said before, twice a year, if I could. It was like a top-up. I just needed the top-up. I remember him meeting Tamura Sensei. Now, Tamura Sensei and him were like two young school children when they met. And the sad thing is, the Japanese culture is they like drinking. And they'd get drunk together and they'd be like laughing and giggling, like reminiscing about the past. And I was listening to them one time. They were speaking Japanese, of course. And yet Tamura was based in France. He was the head there, I think. I don't know how him and Noro got on. Another subject. Anyway, they were laughing and that. And I asked somebody who could understand, translate what was making them so happy. And he said, they were talking about when they were on the mat with O-sensei and how Noro Sensei didn't like spiders. And they were training in Iwama together. And because they were best mates, Saito Sensei and Tamura Sensei, they thought they'd have a joke, and they found one of these big spiders, you know, the ones that come out of the fields. They're really quite huge. Their legs span about, I don't know, 5 to 7 centimetres. We get a lot in the countryside. Anyhow, one would decide to grab a spider, and when they could get near Noro Sensei, while training, this was in front of O-sensei, one would pop the spider in the top of Noro Sensei's gi, because they were just students there. They weren't big masters. They were just, like a lot of us, just students trying to get better. And of course Noro would all of a sudden feel the spider inside him, sort of open his gi and panic. Must be a horrible feeling if you're frightened of spiders. But he would go running off the mat, sort of doing this and shaking himself. And they were talking about how did each one remember those senses saying, that boy's crazy. And Osensi never did know what was making Nora crazy. But this was something that they would do periodically once they found a weakness. And so it was a joyful training as well as a hard training, but even in front of Osensi, they'd still have time to have fun. I was fortunate enough when Saito Sensei was invited to teach in Paris to train with Tamura Sensei. His Aikido was completely different to Saito Sensei. And I thought, well, why is it so different? They were trained by the same person, Sensei. They were best mates. Why isn't their Aikido exactly the same? But do you know anybody whose Aikido is exactly the same? Because I don't. There's a lot of people who look like their teachers, yes. I can look at students and tell who their teachers are. On a seminar, there might be 100 people on the seminar, and I go around and I won't say names now, but I can point out who their teachers are. It's not a game, it's just that they've copied the teacher so well that they look like them in stature and postures and the way they execute the throws, the way they execute the techniques. But that's not themselves. And one day, I hope they will all find themselves. Most people do. And as I've seen, a lot of people, they change. And they changed the Aikido. And I was talking about how Konetsuka changed when someone like me grabbed him who was taught in a completely different school with a maximum force and not just a following mind of flowing, that he was my sensei. I grabbed him and attacked him 100% and gave him what he asked, and he had to deal with it. Now, I was talking about ki in daily life. To me, ki in daily life is using your common sense, using your intuition. But there's a lot of things we don't see, a mass of things we don't see. And those things perhaps never will be of interest to us. Now, there was a book that I'd like to just show you here. And it's about water. And this professor studied this. You'll see it says New York Times bestseller. How can it be a bestseller about the hidden messages in water? It goes on to say, like snowflakes, all the crystals being different, not one crystal being alike. Can anybody prove it? I don't know, perhaps they can't. We can't look at every snowflake that's ever fallen, can we? But in that book, he goes on to talk about how you feel holding a glass of water and how it changes the crystals. These three items that I've got here, if I boil the kettle, what one would you say put the hot water in? I think we all agree, definitely not the flute glass, mainly designed for champagne. This is quite a robust glass, but the good thing about this glass is it's a basic, strong glass. It's got a nice thick rim, a good sturdy base. So that's a base, that's what we call a basic. This is to me Iwama Aikido. The flute glass, very delicate, very thin limb. This is what I would call the Hombu style Aikido. Not really Aikikai, because Aikikai, as I've already said, the teacher makes the style depending on how they see the demand of Aikido. So that brings us to the kettle and the water. You'll see now, because it's a glass kettle, you'll see how it's starting to get warm. And about now is the time I should be making the pour of that water. If I just leave it, because it's friendly, I think I look at the water as friendly. Now it's starting to get angry. Can you see the way it's getting angrier and angrier? You could say more powerful, more dynamic. It's changing. Now whatever you think, let's say, go with my theory that if I poured that water while it was in the angry state, if the water crystals change with how I feel, would I change with how the water feels? Am I that sensitive? No, of course I'm not. But if I use ki in daily life, and I said earlier that the ki, comes out like the hose pipe of shooting energy. It comes from internal, the string. What about if I was absorbing the water's feelings? That is nature. That has as much of part of nature as I do, as my own body. If I poured that while it was angry, then would I be affected internally like an individual crystal? It's just something to consider, for you to consider. You may consider whether I'm mad or not. But I try not to pour a cup of tea, because I like my tea, while the water's boiling. I always try and get to the kettle first. Or I allow the kettle, like now, to become still again, hoping that it's calm and the water is feeling comfortable. I could think the other way. I mean, it's my mind. I could think, I'll pour it when it's bubbling and really powerful, because then I will feel powerful. I'm sort of deciding for the water itself, aren't I? Where the person that's written this book, he's telling me how if you hold a glass of water in your hands and have good thoughts, the crystals change. If you have bad, aggressive thoughts, they change again. So there's a lot going on that we'll never know about, perhaps not even care about. But to me, key in daily life is using something far deeper than we ever really look for on the mat. The yellow mug is obviously the best thing to put tea in if I want to put tea in. But what about if I was going on a trek? I was going camping for 6 months. I'd get my rucksack and fill it with all the things. And I would either go to the shop and get some advice from the people that know. But what about if your student asks you, since I've never been camping before, can you advise me? Take a mug, but better still, take a metal mug. Because a metal mug, You can put anything from champagne in it to warm liquids. Be careful, too hot it could crack. This one, you can put anything hot or cold in it, but it could get the handle broken, but you could still hold it. But being porcelain, if you're going hiking, if you happen to sit back on your rucksack, it could break if it's against a rock. So go and buy yourself a metal one, but one with a handle just like this. This is my suggestion to you. You would hopefully tell the student, because it will do everything. It's basic, but this is key in daily life. Key is good internal spirit. We could say good internal intuition, good common sense. Going on from that, my second book, Keeping the Mind of a Child. I wrote this for those people who are looking for more of a spiritual understanding, to understand or to at least consider the water crystals. Consider, do you want to switch the kettle off before it boils? Or do you want to let it settle so that it's calm? Perhaps you're just really looking at a mirror of yourself, how you would like to be, how you would like to think. Keeping the mind of a child. If you asked a child those questions about the glasses and the mugs, they wouldn't know. It takes an adult who's lived a little while to know this. But the honesty behind it, the internal feeling of the cleanness and the honesty usually comes from a child. So going back to that inside yourself, to me, is very important. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's very different. To me, it is Aikido. Please leave your comments and subscribe to my channel if you're interested. In time I will go on to more technical. But at the moment everybody seems to be showing you Aikido techniques, demonstrations. I wish to talk more, as I do, about the philosophy of how I see Aikido as a whole. And perhaps, even though my master, Coach Itohi, wasn't my master, he taught me a lot through thinking about why he ventured from a very physical Aikido style to a very soft Ki style that developed the internal as well as the external. Thank you.